Welcome back to another episode of the Two Balls, One Basket podcast, a podcast of the Playbook Sports Network. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at PlaybookSN and to visit our website, playbooksn.com. You can find everything on there that we are going to talk about today. As always, I am your host, Jordan. With me today is writer Zak Sadik.
What's going on, Jordan? How's it going?
Sick of the bullshit. We just talked about this.
I'm getting through it.
All right. Dolphins. I know we should probably talk about the Heat, but everybody's talking about the Heat, so let's be different. Let's talk about the Dolphins.
You got a zig, another zag, you know?
First of all, let's just talk about the playoff game. What went wrong?
I
Besides
mean,
everything?
a lot of things went wrong. I don't think that. No, first of all, the elephant in the room is the weather. The Dolphins obviously aren't used to playing in those kinds of temperatures. You know, maybe once or twice a season do they, even play in the cold. And here they are playing in sub-zero temperatures, almost negative 30 when accounting for the wind chills. So that definitely hurt them. And based on the reports, the Dolphins didn't spend any time practicing in that weather. They practiced in Miami before flying to Kansas City. Meanwhile, Kansas City is living in that temperature. Their bodies are used to it, more accustomed to it. Definitely not an excuse, but there probably could have been a better preparation by the Dolphins team. As far as the game itself, it just seemed like the Dolphins didn't have any answers. The Chiefs were commanding the game. They took control of Tyreek Hill. They basically boxed him out of the game with double and triple teams. Obviously, other than the one play that he blew up for a touchdown. But other than that, they had two guys on him all the time, and the Dolphins didn't have any answer for it. They didn't design plays that would scheme other guys open. They didn't use Waddle nearly enough. The running game worked at times, but then of course they couldn't rely on it or didn't rely on it when it mattered most. And so the defense did what they could, but you can't do much in a playoff game when your offense only puts up 7 points on a fluky type play. So I think the offense just crumbled, and it was just disappointing all around. I would have loved to see how they looked in Miami, though, if they played in that same game in Miami, if it was any different.
Even with everyone injured?
I mean, the defense had all the injuries, and
And the defense looked good.
the defense held the Super Bowl champs to what, 21, 20, no, it was 26, I think, at the end, but held them to 20 something points. If the offense is holding the ball, that the defense did what they had to do.
I feel like the Waddle was a whole thing this year. We never heard about him. And last season, he was everywhere.
Statistically speaking, he actually, obviously when you account for the time that he missed from injuries, it actually wasn't that much of a down year compared to last year, but it was so quiet. It was like Tobias Harris, where he gives you the quietest 28 points a game in the NBA. Like Waddle was there and he was, I guess, getting targets and getting catches, but he was nowhere near as impactful as he could be and as he was last year. It seemed like the entire offense was geared toward one guy, and I think we'll get to that later. But over the course of the season, they did not feature him the way they should have.
So you wrote a 5-part miniseries. It's on our website, playbookascend.com. Please check it out. I'm begging. We're going to break down each one. So first one you did, where do the Dolphins go from here? So do you want to give like a short summary about what you wrote?
That one was about the free agency decisions.
Mm-hmm.
That was the main one that was kind of breaking down the game and kind of how the Dolphins have to lick their wounds and kind of regroup going into next year. But then we break it down piece by piece, and I think the next one was about is the next piece the quarterback or the free agents?
Quarterback.
Quarterback. All right, so that's a big decision to make for sure. The Dolphins have to decide if Tua is the guy. In Chris Greer's end of year press conference, it sounded like he wanted to commit to Tua. He wanted Tua to quote unquote be around for a long time playing good football. And that's not exactly what you would say if you were planning on moving off of him or letting him play his last season and then finding someone else at the end of next year. So big decisions to be made. Tua obviously had a career year this year. But the big question is, can he perform in the big games? Is he good enough to take this team to the promised land? Because in every single game against a good opponent this season, he struggled, he disappeared, he threw questionable passes, and I think through most of his interceptions came in those games.
Mhm.
So we need a more reliable Tua. We need a guy that can actually lead the offense instead of kind of faltering to when the defense gets tough. He just chucks the ball or crumbles. But he's still young. There's time for him to grow. Um, but it is a tough decision to make because the team has to figure out if they're going to pay him like the Burrows, like the Herberts, um, or if they're going to try to find their other guy. The question would obviously be who that other guy is. So I'm curious. Like I know that Dolphins fandom is split on Tua. Half the fans are staunch haters, and half the fans are supporters more or less. And there's this middle ground where you can acknowledge that he has flaws, but also he's probably the best available for the Dolphins. I'm curious where you fall in on that, Jordan.
I was just gonna say, I think I agree with the point that he is young. He still has time to develop, but a lot of fans' issues with that is that this team is built to win a Super Bowl right now.
Yep.
When you have a player like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Ramsey,
Bradley Chubb.
Chubb, Phillips, who aren't going to be available most of next season, you don't have time for a quarterback to grow and get these little
Figure it
stupid
out.
mistakes out. Granted, Tua is growing rapid, like fast. But then where I'm confused is I want Tua here. If I had a better option, I wouldn't mind exploring that better option. But that's the thing. There is no better option. You can't afford anyone else. You have no draft capital to go get someone else and to keep this roster the way it is. Tua is your best possible solution.
Yep.
What would be even better is if they can get him for a pay cut. $40 million a year for Tua, I think, is absurd. I wouldn't do it.
Yep. And
If
for
they do
anyone
it,
listening,
if they do it, I'm not like, oh, fuck. But if they can get him 30, 25, why not?
well, I definitely don't think he's going that low. But
Well, he fucking better.
for anyone watching that hasn't read the piece in the article on playbooksn.com, it breaks down the numbers of the top-notch quarterbacks as well as a possible sweet spot of where the Dolphins could get Tua to agree to a deal, given the ups and downs he's had. Something similar to a Daniel Jones type contract. Obviously, offering anyone a Daniel Jones contract would be a slap in the face because Tua is a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. But the argument is that contract was too good for Daniel Jones. So if the team is able to negotiate something similar to that range, I think that would be a nice sweet spot that the team is not overpaying, but also maintaining flexibility and Tua gets his money. So, but like you said, the options out there. I listed a few in the article. Um, most of the available quarterbacks this offseason are either old or less proven than Tua is. So you'd have to rearrange the offense again around whatever this new quarterback is, and then hope that they can perform better than Tua. And it's just there's no guarantee.
Like, I saw a bunch of stuff about Kirk Cousins. Tua is literally Kirk Cousins, just not coming off of a fucking ACL injury or a kill, whatever he tore.
And he's what, 10, 12 years younger?
Yeah. To the relationship that Tua McDaniel have created, you have to bank on that. Emphasis on the word bank. Like they have to do whatever they can to make this deal affordable. And I want to know, what do you think? Do you think they let him play out the last year of the contract? Or are they going to give him the extension this offseason?
That's the question. That's the question. Obviously, in a perfect world, you'd be able to have answers to all the questions when you're going to the negotiations table. Um, Tua hasn't answered all the questions. He did answer a big one last year. He stayed healthy, and that was all we heard about all offseason. It didn't matter who the Dolphins brought in, who the coaches were, how the team was feeling. It all depended on Tua's health. And Tua played all 17 games this year. And so that was a huge question about him. So he did answer that. But obviously the improvement and the big game performances still have to be determined. So if Chris Greer and Tua's agent talk this offseason and there's that nice middle ground to be had because Tua understands the limitations, understands the salary cap situation, and is willing to take a reasonable deal for a quarterback, then I say do it now. If he's willing to take that Daniel Jones money and he's not gonna put his foot down and demand 50 plus like the Herberts and Burrows and Hurts got last offseason, then go for it. But if he says he wants to be, a top 3, top 5 paid quarterback in the league, like those other guys in his same draft class, I say, you know what? We'll wait it out. Prove it to us again.
He asked for that. I'm saying, fuck you, get out of here.
Bring it back next year. Let's win a playoff game. Let's get to the Super Bowl or something. Show us that you can perform in these high intensity, high pressure moments. And then we can go back to the negotiating table and say, all right, we'll give you this kind of money. But I don't think it would make sense for the team to throw a huge contract at him right now when he is still under team control next year and beyond, honestly, with the franchise tags. It's not ideal to use a franchise tag on a quarterback. But if it's a Lamar Jackson type situation and there's a huge gap between what the quarterback wants and what the team's willing to give, you have that at your disposal where next year, if there's still no better option, you can franchise tag him and kind of prolong negotiations. So if you can negotiate a good deal, I say do it now. But otherwise, there's flexibility and the team has all the control.
All right, so let's get into the next one, and this is about the impending free agents because we got a fuck ton of them.
Yep.
3 main ones: Christian Wilkins, Robert Hunt, Connor Williams. Before we get into it, you keeping all 3?
In the perfect world, you are. All 3 of those guys showed that they could be elite level players at their positions. And when you're a win now team, you can't be bleeding those guys. You can't be letting go of guys that are elite at their position. That's how you become past the win now window. So obviously, if the team thinks that they can fill those holes, if there's guys that they like in the draft, I've seen a lot of people, mock drafting centers to the Dolphins at 21. If they think that there's a better option in the draft, you know what? I can see them letting go of one of those guys.
But they can't draft linemen.
Yeah, right. But maybe you let go of Connor Williams because he had previously been, giving the team issues, whether it was bad snaps or holding out last off season for more money. He hasn't necessarily been, he's played when he's had to, but he hasn't exactly been the perfect soldier. So if they let go of Connor Williams, I'd understand, as assuming they plan on replacing him and not just picking some random up off the street. But I hope that they can bring back all those guys. Wilkins is probably the most elite and also the most expensive guy out of the bunch. But we've seen him perform, and he is a monster on the interior defensive line. It would just depend on.
He's just good for morale.
He is good for morale. He's a hell of a team player. He could have held out this season because his contract situation was undetermined, but he came to work and he performed. He put in a hell of a season on the last year of his contract, risking injury and all that stuff. So I think that Wilkins, I'd love to have him back. It depends on the money. He's going to want to get paid over $20 million a year. He thinks he's an elite defensive tackle, and you know what? He is. If the Dolphins are able to maneuver the cap enough to make it worth his while, that's great. I'd probably say out of those 3, though, Rob Hunt is probably the most likely to return. It sounded like him and the team had already had discussions on an extension during the year, which is what we saw with Austin Jackson. Austin Jackson came back and took the extension halfway through the year. So I think the team is serious on extending Hunt. And so if they can get a reasonable deal there, I think he's the most like that. I'd put Rob Hunt at about 80% chance of returning. Wilkins, uh, possibly 50% chance of returning because his price tag is so high.
He's the one
And
I
there
want
may
the
be someone out
most.
there willing to, and there may be someone out there willing to pay him more. And then Connor
Bears.
Williams, I'd probably say 25% chance of returning. Um, so we'll see how they maneuver it, but it all depends on how much money they want to be spending. Because after next season, the salary cap, what the Dolphins are paying in salaries, it balloons, and the Dolphins are going to have to make even tougher decisions next offseason on who to keep and who to get rid of. Um, so hopefully they can keep them all, but I don't know if it's feasible based on how much money the Dolphins owe next year and beyond.
And then it doesn't help that you got Teron Armstead over here not knowing if he wants to retire or not after getting a 5-year contract.
Yeah, in hindsight, not the best contract, especially with how much he's paid or
I
how
want to
much he's
kick that
actually
guy in the
played.
balls.
But yeah, so that one's a tough one that they're gonna have to eat for the next couple of years. The big one that I'm interested in, and I go deeper on it in the article, is Xavier Howard.
I was just gonna say that.
What happens with him? He's
They
been
got
elite
he's
in his
got he's got
career.
they got to cut his ass, right?
I would assume so. If I was running the Dolphins, I'd cut him. He's been elite in his career, but over the last 2 years, he's shown that he can't stay healthy, and B, even when he is healthy, he is by no means anywhere close to his prior elite form. Um, I
I
guess it
saw
has.
you shared a tweet and it was like over the next 3 years, the price tag that they have to pay him if they cut him, and this year if they cut him, it's the cheapest.
Yeah. So if based on over the caps number projections, and they're usually pretty accurate, they're actually extremely accurate regarding contract, payments and salary cap permutations and stuff like that. If you play around with their roster construction tool, cutting Xavier Howard this year means that you owe him, I think it was $25 million, and you can either pay him that now, this upcoming season, or spread it out over 2 seasons. Um, if you hold on to him, you're paying him this year's $25 million salary. And then if you cut him next offseason, you owe him another, I think, $23 million that you can pay that year or over the next 2 years beyond that. So in total, you're still paying him 40 something $million.
Mhm.
And then it gets even worse if you hold on to him for 2 years, just how his contract is set up. So, great work by his agent getting him that kind of deal where he's getting, $20 million until he's what, 33, 34 years old.
It helps when you sit out every offseason for a new contract, even though you just got one.
If Jalen Ramsey was available those years, I don't think Xavier ever gets those contracts.
Ever.
But it would be my expectation that Xavier is gone unless there's a significant change, restructure of his contract, which he's already come out and said he's not planning on doing. So if the Dolphins do cut him, they do pay a lot up front for a guy that's not on their team anymore, but it does save you money down the road. And it could help you extend those guys that we were talking about earlier.
You also have a couple guys that are cut candidates like Emmanuel Ogba,
He's
Raekwon
gone.
Davis.
Emmanuel Ogba is gone.
Yeah, he's gone. Raekwon, he's probably leaving.
Raekwon,
Jerome
we'll see.
Baker.
Yeah. Jerome Baker makes a lot of money for a guy that is probably average at his position. I think they could bring Baker back at a reasonable figure, whether it's cut and look to
Resign.
re-sign him down the road, or just restructure his contract so it's more team friendly.
Mhm.
But Ogba is as good as gone. Even though we need defensive linemen for when Chubb and Phillips are still recovering at the beginning of next year, Ogba is making way too much money to be below average and not even being able to sniff the field last season before the injuries happened. So they'll either draft someone or sign a cheap free agent. There's no reason to be paying Emmanuel Ogba $17-18 million next year for the production that we've gotten from him.
All right. Now the next topic is coaching an issue for the Dolphins. This one's fun because it always we hire him, we love him. we're really good for the season. We love them. Then the playoffs come. The end of the year comes. We suck. We hate them. Rinse, repeat, reuse. That's what happened the last 2 years.
Yep.
So is he the problem?
That was the hardest article to write because I am a huge supporter of Mike McDaniel. Um, I love the energy he brings. The team has honestly nothing but good things to say about him, and obviously you can say, oh, don't they have to say that? Don't they have to act like they like the coach if they want to play? Well, not every player liked Brian Flores, and things, whether it was anonymous or not, made it to the news cycle where the team wasn't 100% trustworthy with Flores at some point. And then you had the infighting where some guys came out anonymously against Tua and the quarterback, and other guys were kind of going behind the scenes, like the whole Minka situation where he came out anonymously, said, I don't want to be a loser on this team anymore. So it can be very clear when a coach does not have the locker room under control. And none of that has happened under McDaniel. McDaniel empowers his players. McDaniel goes out of his way to praise his guys, and he's not the drill sergeant type where he's going to curse you out on the sideline. He's more of the supportive and constructive criticism type coach where you throw an interception. Yeah, no one likes throwing interceptions, but hey, tell me what you saw. Why did that happen? Let's figure that out together. And it seems like every player in that locker room has bought in and is open to that type of coaching. So while he has had some issues over the last 2 years, and I'll touch on that in a minute, I definitely think that he is still part of the solution, and he's a net positive for this team, by a good net positive by a lot. But he is still in year 2 of being a head coach, a guy that has never had anywhere close to this kind of responsibility before in his life. In San Francisco, he was the run game coordinator and part-time offensive coordinator who wasn't calling the plays. So, he did not have the power that he does now, not anything close to it. So he's still learning himself. And he's so smart that he will be a head coach for a long time, whether it's with the Dolphins or elsewhere. He will be given the opportunities, and based on what he's done with the Dolphins offense, there will not be a shortage of opportunities for him if he hypothetically were to be fired by the Dolphins at some point. So if you tell me what Mike McDaniel is going to look like in 20 years as a head coach, with all the experience that he gains in 20 years, he's still going to be an offensive genius. He's going to be better equipped to control the locker room, and the stuff that he would have seen would give him the experience he needs to develop all of the solutions for the problems that he has. But he's just not there right now. So the Dolphins will have to commit to him, which they already have with a big contract, and just trust that he can continue growing. But I do go into some of those issues in the article. You guys can go read them there. But Jordan, was there anything that stuck out to you about the issues that he has, or concerns about him being able to grow enough to be the right coach?
My thing with McDaniel is, like you said, he wasn't a head coach before this. He was a run game coordinator, not an offensive coordinator, a specific portion of the offense.
Right.
So he's still developing. From last year, he's already corrected a lot of the issues he had last year with the game management, the running the ball. I know we didn't run the ball much in the playoff game, but we ran the ball all season long. If we want Tua to grow, why can't we want McDaniel to grow?
Right.
You have to get this experience somewhere. It's the same thing like when you get a job and be like, oh, we require 4 years of experience. Well, where the fuck am I supposed to get the experience from if you're not going to let me get it?
Yep.
I like McDaniel. I think he's grown from last year, and hopefully he continues to grow. My one thing is I hope he does find someone to give play calling abilities to, because sometimes the play call is just, if Tyreek's not open, what do you want to do, Tua? So
I think that has more to do with the scheme, honestly. I I had this suspicion early on in the year based on how much we were targeting Tyreek. I feel like McDaniel and Tyreek and Tua were kind of like kumbaya. We're gonna go for the record. We want
Yeah,
Tyreek to
I
break
think that's what it
2,000.
was.
Tyreek said he wanted to break 2,000, and then it seemed like McDaniel and Tua made it their mission to get Tyreek to 2,000. Um, so it wasn't always the best football. They were feeding Tyreek, and it seemed like if Tyreek was covered, like we mentioned earlier, there was no plan B. There was no, oh, Tyreek's covered, so then the read becomes Waddle. It was never that. If it was going to Tyreek, it was going to Tyreek. And if Tyreek was out for that series, whether he was hurt or just needing a breather, then we run a fluid offense. We get Barrios involved, which happened earlier in the year and then disappeared. We got Waddle involved almost immediately once Tyreek was out of the game. So I do think that there was an over reliance on Tyreek because they were trying to get him to that record. And so there needs to be a bigger balance in the scheme. And I think having someone else, whether it's another offensive assistant that has more experience or whether it's someone else calling the plays, having another voice in that room would be extremely beneficial. And I think it would be better off if it was someone older, someone more experienced, kind of like a Vic Fangio type, but for the offense. And something noteworthy was I don't know if you remember this, Jordan. When we first hired McDaniel, obviously he's young and inexperienced as a head coach. They went out and they hired Jim Caldwell to be an assistant coach, a special assistant, which usually means they're basically the head coach's right hand man and they're like a consultant for the team. Jim Caldwell has been a head coach for years and years and years. Spent time with Detroit. He spent time as an assistant, I think, with the Chargers for some time, but he's been around the game forever. And he's more of an offensive mind. But he would have been there to kind of guide McDaniel through the tough parts of being a head coach that he obviously struggled with in his first year. With the play calling, with the time to get the play in, with the clock management, game management, that kind of thing. That there would have been another voice in the room kind of helping him with those experience type things. And then something happened. I don't remember if Jim Caldwell got sick or if someone in his family got sick. And, before training camp started, he was out and he couldn't perform that role anymore. And I think
Vic Fangio expected to become Eagles defensive coordinator after mutual agreement to part with Dolphins.
Oh, wow.
Well,
news has broken.
Thank God for the Heat.
And in that same report, former Chargers coach Brandon Staley is available and could be a candidate in Miami to replace him. Wow, what a shuffle that would be. So this is breaking news, everybody. This just came out, so you're getting our first reactions. Vic Fangio is out. It was a disappointing year.
No, it wasn't.
I am surprised that
I knew that old fuck didn't want to be here.
Wow.
What a coward.
So the funny thing is, when the Dolphins hired him, he really underplayed what he did with the Eagles the year before. He was a defensive consultant, but only during the Eagles playoff run 2 years ago. Or not 2 years ago, last season. And said he wasn't really around the team that much. He watched film, but he was really, semi-retired and doing his thing from his log cabin or whatever it was. So I'm surprised that he leaves Miami and immediately has this gig waiting for him with Philly. That's very interesting to me and sounds like something behind the scenes was going on there.
How does he leave? Wasn't he under contract?
Yes. The most expensive contract for a defensive coordinator ever.
What the fuck? Football makes no sense. Contracts are optional in football.
So I'm curious. Well, first of all, I'm curious what happened. If there was a falling out, if McDaniel and Fangio kind of butted heads, I'm curious what happened there. The other thing I'm curious about is it says mutually agreed. Does that mean he got bought out of his contract? Does that mean he left money on the table to go be a coach elsewhere? because Stephen Ross probably wouldn't be very happy paying out millions of dollars to have this guy go coach somewhere else on the richest contract that the Dolphins just gave him. So very interesting stuff. And that, honestly, I wouldn't mind Brandon Staley as the Dolphins defensive coordinator.
Really?
He's not a head coach, but he has a defensive mind. And I wouldn't
Chargers
be
defense sucks.
huh?
The Chargers defense was horrible though.
It was, but Staley obviously was not focused on the defense as much as as a head coach. So I don't know. I'd be interested in it.
Just let me do it. You hit him, you break his neck. Go. Team.
So that is very interesting, and the defense is back at square one. We're dealing with injuries. We don't have anyone leading the way. We don't have the experience.
Dude got very upset about all the injuries. He's like, I don't know what to do. I gotta go.
Wow, that is crazy. I'm not sure what to think about it yet, honestly.
Well, I'm pissed. All right.
Big Fangio, if you remember last offseason,
We're running low on time, so let's get this last one in. Where is it? Are the Miami Dolphins still contenders? I knew that one off the back of my head. I don't even have to.
I mean, depending on what this Vic Fangio news means.
I mean, yeah, it just fell off a couple of levels. I'm not gonna lie.
If Vic Fangio decided that it was time to jump ship and this is a sinking ship and everything's crumbling, then probably not contenders. But if this was a situation where the team, again, mutually agreed to part ways because the defense wasn't doing what it needed to do and could have been better, then maybe reshuffling and getting a different head above the defense would be a good thing. But with the pieces the Dolphins have, they will be contenders, assuming McDaniel, Tua, Chubb, and Phillips, assuming that everyone's back at some point next year. They have the pieces to be contenders. Jalen Ramsey and Tyreek Hill, if you have them on both sides of your ball, you're going to be a contender. It's just about growth, and obviously figuring out what you're going to do with those free agents. But
I have a question.
Yeah,
they were talking about Van Ginkel returning, and they're like, he really wants to be back in Miami. He thinks he's a really good piece in Fangio's scheme. Do you think now he follows Fangio to the Eagles?
No. Van Ginkel was here first.
I'll kill him.
Van Ginkel. The thing I've never understood is when Van Ginkel is given the opportunity to play, he's a playmaker.
He's amazing.
If you put him on the defense, if you play him on defense, he's putting pressure on the quarterback. He's getting sacks. If you don't want to give him that many reps on defense and you play him on special teams, he's blocking punts. Like, the guy is a playmaker, and he hasn't been injury prone. So I've never understood why the team, whether it was under Flores or whether it was under Fangio, why he didn't get much run as a starter or as a constant rotational player. And he's only gotten chances when there's injuries. He hasn't gotten a chance until there were injuries. But when there's injuries, he's performing. So I would love the Dolphins to bring him back. I don't think he's following Fangio because Fangio didn't play him the way he should have. But I think if you bring in a guy like Staley or anyone else to play the defense and you just show them tape on Van Ginkel, he's showing out and they might play him more often. So I'm not sure why he hasn't played as much, but I'd love to have him back.
Fuck it, bring Brian Flores back.
Oh my God, wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something?
Talk about fucking war. We're gonna have Tua over here throwing and be like, Tua, what are you doing? My bad. Didn't see that one.
Nah, you're coaching the defense, bro.
Yeah,
back up.
Fuck off, Brian.
Man, what a combo that would be.
All right, that was good. So that's all we got. Is there anything you want to say before I let you go?
Shit, I mean, the Vic Fangio era.
News on here, bro.
The Vic Fangio era, circa 2023 to 2024.
Not even.
Over.
September to what? January.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's crazy. But yeah, go Dolphins and go Heat. Fingers crossed.
we're gonna pot again after we see Terry Rozier drop 40.
Got to wait and see with that, but we'll see. Go Heat.
All right, Zach.
See you.